Now this time, let's have lesson 3.3. It's another short lesson for us today. Lesson 3.3 is about the properties of exponential equations. Now, how do we use these properties? Actually, we use the properties in order to graph exponential functions. But before in the face-to-face setup, students would graph the exponential functions. But this time, during the pandemic, we have only the MELCs, the most essential learning competencies. And should you say, unfortunately or fortunately on your part, there's no graphing for exponential functions. So you'll just learn about the properties. Now, today's memory verse is still found in Genesis 22, verse 17. And it talks about how Abraham was blessed exponentially by the Lord. In the previous lesson, we have talked about Solomon, on how the Lord blessed him exponentially with wisdom and understanding. And this time, your MVC Boosters is centered on another Bible character. We have Abraham. Abraham, exponentially blessed. You need to share with us in what ways was Abraham exponentially blessed. You need to list some of his blessings. Now, at the end of today's lesson, you'll be able to do these things. First, represent the exponential function through its table of values, graph, and equation. Second, find the domain and range. And third, determine the intercepts, zeros, and asymptotes. Now let's start. Let me first skip this one because I will talk more about this in the next lesson for transformations. Now, here's a possible graph of an exponential function. Now, we mentioned that in the exponential function, your base should be positive, or else if your base is a negative number, it will go down like this one. Now, if your base is greater than 1, then your graph will be increasing. Now, what are best ways to plot a graph? Before you can plot a graph, I suggest that you can make a table of values. Like if our x is 0, so 2 to the power of 0, that will be 1. If our x is 1, that's 2 to the power of 1. Our y is 2. If our x is 3, that's 2 to the power of 3. Then 2 times 2 times 2, not 2 times 3. Then our y is 8. And if we plot it in our graph, in our coordinate system, you'll see that it is increasing. But if you'll check, the more we go lower in our x, the more it approaches 0. We only have 1, 8, 1 over 16, 1 over 32. But it will never reach 0. We call the x-axis the asymptotic line. Remember I told you last time, what's an asymptotic line? You get closer and closer to each other, but you are not meant to be together. So that is an asymptotic line. It gets closer and closer to 0, but it will never reach 0. Now, if your base is a fraction that's between 0 and 1, then your graph will look like this one. It's decreasing. But again, if it's a positive number greater than 1, it is increasing. Now, what are some properties of exponential functions? Remember 2 things. Our base should never be equal to 0, and our base should never be equal to 1. Now, here are some properties. The domain, your x here. The value of your x can be any number. So we say that our domain is the set of all real numbers from negative infinity to positive infinity. Next, the range is the set of all positive numbers. If you'll see in our graph, if this is our graph, whether it's increasing or it's decreasing, it only occupies the positive values of the y-axis. So it means that our range will be the set of all positive numbers. Next, if our b is greater than 1, like 2 to the power of x, our function is increasing, like the first one. But if our b is between 0 and 1, then our function is decreasing. The next one, our graph passes to a point 0, 1. Why? Because any number raised to the 0 exponent, the answer is 1. The next one, for the x and the y intercepts. There is no x-intercept in the exponential function. So it means that it will never cross the x-axis. And it only has y-intercept at 1. Y only passes at 0, 1. No other points. The next, the graph is asymptotic to the x-axis. It will never cross the x-axis. And this is what we call the horizontal asymptote. However, there is no vertical asymptote. So it goes infinitely, passing all the y-axis. No vertical asymptote, but the horizontal asymptote is in the x-axis. Now, there are 3 points in which the graph of an exponential function passes. It passes by, you just need to memorize this. 0, 1, that's the first one. The next is 1b. The next is negative 1, 1 over b. So for example, if we have f of x equals 5 to the power of x, then it passes by 3 points. 0, 1. The next is 1, 5. And the next is negative 1, 1 over b. So 1 over 5. 3 points. Now let's have 3 examples. The first one, we need to sketch the graph of f of x equals 2 to the power of x and determine its domain, range, intercepts, zeros, and asymptotes. So let's start. What's the domain? The domain will be all real numbers. What's the range? All positive numbers. Now, what's the y-intercept? It only passes by 0 and 1. How about the x-intercept? Remember, it will never cross by the x-axis. So, none. And our x-axis is our horizontal asymptote. We say that's y equals 0. There is no vertical asymptote. And since it will not cross by the x-axis, then there are no zeros. Any questions?
Ma'am, nalang kay gilibgan sa tingnan ganina ma'am ba sa properties of exponential functions.
Yes.
'Di ba ang giingon dito kay b is greater than 1 dapat ni kung ma-fraction lugar ang b, yan ang disobey ang law.
No.
Na B.
Here, because you see there are two conditions. B can be greater than 1. Here, there's another condition, and another is B can be between 0 and 1.
Ay, tama deh.
So if B is
Salamat.
greater than 1, it's increasing. It goes like this. But if B is between 0 and 1, it's decreasing, like this one. Is it now clear?
Yes, ma'am. Salamat, ma'am.
Thank you. The next one. This time, let's graph. Let's graph we will now graph f of x equals 2 to the power of x. Now remember, we only have 3 points, right? You can just memorize that. The first is it passes by 0, 1. That's the y-intercept. The next is 1, 2. The next is negative 1, 1 over 2. Where did I get this? Remember the properties 0, 1, 1b, and negative 1, 1 over b. So we have, let's now plot 0, 1. Next, 1, 2. And negative 1, 1 half. And as you connect the dots, remember that it will never cross at the x-axis. It's asymptotic to the x-axis. Any questions? What's in your worksheets? In your worksheet, you'll only have this one. I only show the graph for you to visualize how it will look like, but there's no graphing in your worksheet. Let's go to the next example. Okay, 1/2 to the power of x. What's the domain? You just need to memorize it. All real numbers. What's the range? All positive numbers. What's the y-intercept? 0 and 1. What's the x-intercept? It never crosses the x-axis, so no x-intercept, no zeros, and no vertical asymptote, because it will never cross at the x-axis. And since it will never cross at the x-axis, your horizontal asymptote is y equals 0, or we say at the x-axis. Now, how do we graph it? Again, the 3 points. What are the 3 points? That's 0, 1, 1b, and negative 1, 1 over b. Since our function is 1/2 to the power of x, then our b is 1/2. So we have 0, 1, 1 and 1/2, then negative 1, 1 over 1/2 is equal to 2. There. So let's plot 0, 1, 1 and 1/2, negative 1, 2. Connect the dots and be sure it will never cross at the x-axis. Don't forget to place arrows on the end, because it means that our graph does not end there. It continues rapidly. Any questions?
Sabtan na, ma'am.
Thank you. Let's go to the last example. Okay. Now, use your chat boxes to help me with this one. What's our domain for 7 to the power of x? It will serve as the review for your quiz. What's our domain? Oh, very good. All real numbers. Next, what is our y-intercept? Y-intercept. Y-intercept. Again, y-intercept. Very good. 0, 1. What is our 0? What's the 0 of the function? What's the 0 of the function? Very good, none, because it will never cross at the x-axis. Next, what's the range? Range of the function. What's our range of the function? Very good. It's all positive numbers. Next, what's our x-intercept? X-intercept. Very good. There's no x-intercept. How about our vertical asymptote? What's our vertical asymptote? Very good. There's no vertical asymptote. And the last one, what's our horizontal asymptote? You say y equals 0 or at the x-axis. Oh, very good for that one. And now, can you share with me what are the 3 points in the graph or the function 7 to the power of x? What are the 3 points? Ready? 0, 1. Very good. What's the next one? 1 and 7. Very good. What's the last one? -1 and 1/7. So let's plot it. 0, 1. Let's imagine there's 7 here. The -1, 1, 7. It's asymptotic. Again, it will never cross by the x-axis. So this is now our graph. Any questions? Or give me a thumbs up if you're ready for